When I saw him standing in front of the burning fireplace, I thought, that's him. She was only 17 when they first met. It happened during winter holidays on a skiing trip in Quebec, Canada. At the time, Ethel was sharing a room at Manhattanville College with Jean Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's sister. It was Jean who invited the Skakel sisters to join the trip, the very trip where they met Bobby and John Kennedy. Ethel immediately noticed Bobby's open interest in her sister, and, almost in retaliation, began desperately flirting with John. What she didn't know was that Robert himself had been charmed by Ethel, yet he believed that a girl so bright and lively could never possibly be interested in him. Bobby dreamed of finding a modest, gentle woman, someone who would become a devoted wife, build a cozy home, and give birth to many children. He deliberately paid attention to girls no one else noticed, convinced that such women made the best wives. He described Ethel Skakel as bold, spirited, and petite, and once admitted that she reminded him of a mischievous little elf. Still, he stubbornly continued courting shy, plain-looking, and badly limping Patricia. It took 2 years for the ice to finally break. Had Ethel been less decisive and less enterprising, Patricia might well have been the one soon trying on an engagement ring. One day, Bobby invited Patricia Skakel to spend the weekend at the Kennedy family home so she could meet his parents. Ethel insisted on coming along, and in just 2 days, she completely won over Bobby, his parents, and the entire household. Rose Kennedy smiled tenderly as she watched the cheerful, radiant Ethel Skakel. "She will be the perfect Kennedy," she said. Her words meant a great deal to Robert. Joseph Kennedy expected his sons to be the best in everything. Any failure was treated as a catastrophe. Rose, for her part, was not a particularly affectionate mother. She was even stricter with the children than her husband, showing little interest in their worries while demanding constant excellence. Ethel Skakel was born on April 11, 1928, in Boston, the sixth of 7 children in a wealthy family descended from Irish immigrants. Her father, George Skakel, founded Lakes Carbon Corporation, one of the largest private companies in the United States. He was a domineering man who tolerated no objections. Yet the true commander of the household was his wife, and she ran the home and ruled the family while carefully maintaining the illusion that she was merely following her husband's orders. She instilled the same philosophy in her 4 daughters, Georgiana, Patricia, Ethel, and Anne. Stay in the shadows and fully support your husband. From childhood, Ethel was extremely active and mischievous. The family tutor, who prepared the children for school, later recalled, "Ethel adored the pranks of her older brothers and followed them around like a little puppy. She was light-minded and not especially bright, so she had to assert herself through sports and horseback riding. At the same time, she was a charming little girl who always entertained her father during the rare hours he spent at home." From a young age, Ethel dreamed of a love story like that of her great-grandfather Gerald Jordan and Mary Roach, the daughter of wealthy plantation owners. Though they loved each other deeply, Mary's parents fiercely opposed the match and sent her to a convent. Jordan found her and helped her escape. They married and lived a long, happy life together. People said of Ethel that she was fiercely stubborn, naive, lacking refined taste, and madly in love with Robert. The Skakel family closely resembled the Kennedys. Wealthy, large, Catholic, and descended from Irish immigrants. Ethel and Robert were alike both outwardly and inwardly. Both were deeply religious. As a child, Robert dreamed of becoming a priest and happily served at Mass. Ethel once dreamed of becoming a nun and even confided this to her future father-in-law. Joseph Kennedy had a serious conversation with her. "My dear, being a wife and mother to the children of a good Catholic man is no less a service to God." It was Joseph's blessing. In February 1950, the engagement of Robert Kennedy and Ethel Skakel was announced. On June 17, 1950, they were married in a Catholic church in Greenwich. The bride was 22, the groom 25. Both families spared no expense. The wedding was lavish, attended by over 2,000 guests, politicians, diplomats, businessmen. The official ceremony was dignified and elegant, unlike the wild celebrations that preceded it. The bachelor and bachelorette parties thrown by the young Kennedys and Skakels were excessively rowdy. During the bachelor party, members of both clans and their friends practically demolished a New York club. Ethel's brothers, in particular, had a pronounced fondness for loud parties and alcohol. The newlyweds honeymooned in Hawaii. Upon returning, they moved to Charlottesville, where Robert continued his studies at the University of Virginia School of Law. Unlike many of her peers, Ethel firmly believed that virginity was meant only for one's future husband. Once, she won over her future mother-in-law by boldly declaring, "Mrs. Kennedy, I promise I will give you more grandchildren than you had children." Joseph and Rose Kennedy had 9 children. Ethel began setting up their family home, though she proved to be a rather mediocre housekeeper. No one expected her to cook or clean. The couple had servants, but even managing household staff was difficult for her. In other ways, however, Robert was fortunate. Ethel eagerly shared all his interests. He loved sports, and so did she. Tennis, skiing, figure skating. She was willing to follow him anywhere and regarded him as an absolute ideal, the perfect man, the perfect human being. One of Bobby's classmates, Barrett Prettyman, recalled, "She looked at Robert as if he were God, someone who was always right, even when he did things no one could understand." Soon after the wedding, Ethel discovered she was pregnant. The birth was difficult. Their daughter, Kathleen, named after Robert's late sister, was born 2 weeks overdue and was very large. Ethel struggled greatly to recover but never let her husband see how hard it was. Only years later did she admit to her daughters how much suffering she had endured. The second pregnancy was no easier. Ethel's sister Georgiana contracted rubella during pregnancy and gave birth to a disabled child. Ethel, who had caught the illness from her sister, waited in terror, fearing the same fate. Fortunately, in September 1952, a healthy boy was born, Joseph Patrick. After that, children came one after another. Critics cruelly called Ethel a peasant and a cow. She responded calmly, "I set myself the goal of making as many copies of my Bobby as possible. A man that wonderful should have many children." She also said, "Many people hire help to look after their children while they do other things. We hire help to do other things while we look after our children." A family friend later recalled, "Robert and Ethel truly enjoyed each other's company. Even when dining at home, Ethel would come downstairs dressed, styled, and perfumed as if it were a first date." In 1953, John Fitzgerald Kennedy married Jacqueline Bouvier, largely a choice made by their father. Joseph Kennedy believed John needed a wife from America's elite. Educated, elegant, reserved, capable of holding any conversation without overshadowing her husband. He needed a highly educated, photogenic wife who had never been married before, someone with the exceptional social qualities Jacqueline possessed, wrote Jacqueline's biographer, David Heyman. She was a debutante that year, studying at the Sorbonne, extraordinarily intelligent. For him, it was a step upward. The relationship between the 2 daughters-in-law never worked. Jacqueline considered Ethel uncultured and her family unsophisticated. She allowed herself crude jokes, calling Ethel a baby-making machine. Ethel was no less sharp-tongued. Once, when Jacqueline said she had dreamed of becoming a ballerina as a child, Ethel laughed loudly, baring her gums and large teeth, glanced pointedly at Jackie's feet, and said, "With legs like that, you shouldn't have dreamed of ballet. You should have thought about football." After his marriage, John Kennedy plunged into politics. In 1956, the Kennedys launched a political campaign to secure John's nomination as the Democratic Party's candidate. Robert took charge of his brother's campaign headquarters. Ethel, despite being pregnant once again, eagerly volunteered to help. She met with voters and hosted tea gatherings with the wives of Kennedy supporters. Jackie, meanwhile, was bored and made no effort to hide her indifference to what was happening. In 1961, John Kennedy became the first Catholic president in U.S. history and the youngest president ever elected. He was 43 years old. John appointed Robert as Attorney General. Nepotism was widely criticized and openly discussed, but Bobby proved that he was ideally suited for the position. When tensions with Cuba escalated into the Cuban Missile Crisis, Robert's determination and persistence, combined with political prudence, helped prevent a Third World War. Among those close to the brothers, it was soon said that the educated, driven, and strong-willed Robert might have become a politician, or even a president, no less capable than the charming and carefree John. The Kennedy administration in Washington was bright, but far from easy. The Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the fight against the unchecked power and abuses of the FBI, the battle against corruption at the highest levels, and finally, against the mafia. Robert Kennedy received threats more than once, both direct and indirect. Attempts were made to pass warnings through his father, who tried to temper his son's fiery nature. But he did not succeed. In December 1961, Joseph Kennedy suffered a stroke. In 1956, Robert and Ethel moved to the vast Hickory Hill estate in Virginia, with 13 bedrooms, gardens, stables, a tennis court, and a swimming pool. Ethel hosted balls, masquerades, social gatherings, and birthday celebrations attended by politicians, international figures, and actors. In 1958, the Women's League named 30-year-old Ethel, already the mother of 6, Homemaker of the Year and awarded her a silver cup. Robert joked, winking at her, "Grab the prize and run before they come see our house." Despite the staff, chaos reigned. Children screaming, a sea lion pup in the pool, dogs running free, a giant tortoise in the garden, and even a porcupine wandering the grounds. Amid this pandemonium, Robert and Ethel felt perfectly at home. Robert had always valued Ethel's love and wisdom, repaying her with loyalty and devotion. For a time. Until he met Marilyn Monroe, who for a long time had been John Kennedy's lover. John could not find the strength to break things off with Marilyn, and when he finally did, she swallowed a large number of pills and was barely saved. After leaving the hospital, Marilyn called the president incessantly, driving John's secretaries to the brink of madness. It was then that the younger brother took it upon himself to speak with Monroe and find out under what conditions she would leave John alone. The meeting between Robert and Marilyn marked the beginning of an affair. Perhaps Marilyn wanted to get revenge on John, or perhaps she tried to replace the elder Kennedy with his brother, who resembled him. One way or another, Robert became involved with Marilyn. He suffered deeply and still loved Ethel. The affair with Monroe was a sin, sweet, intoxicating, and magical, but it weighed heavily on him. When Robert decided to leave Marilyn, she seemed to lose her mind. Monroe began calling into late-night radio shows with open lines, speaking publicly about her relationship with Robert. She planned to hold a press conference and reveal everything, blackmailing both brothers. On the night of August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe, according to the official version, died from a sleeping pill overdose. The Kennedy family breathed a sigh of relief. John outlived his lover only briefly. On November 22, 1963, he was assassinated in Dallas. For Robert, it was a devastating blow. He adored his brother and admired him deeply. After the funeral, Robert fell into depression. Everyone expected him to leave politics. But Ethel found the right words to support and comfort her husband. Ethel assured Jacqueline that she and Bobby would always be there for her, ready to help and support her. Indeed, Ethel often took Jackie's children into her home whenever she wanted a moment alone. Robert began spending more time at his sister-in-law's house. He spent more time with Jackie and her children, 5-year-old Caroline and 3-year-old John Jr., than with his own family. Robert truly loved his niece and nephew. He played games with them, read them bedtime stories, and spoke of their father, constantly reminding them what an extraordinary man John had been. He also wanted Jacqueline, even for a brief moment, to forget the horror, the newspapers, the news, the death of her husband. Jackie found comfort in a new romance, but it brought her no real happiness. Rumors began to circulate about Robert's relationship with Jacqueline. Ethel, burdened with yet another child, felt intense jealousy but kept her composure. She worried far more about Robert's closeness to Jackie than she had about his affair with Marilyn Monroe. Jacqueline Kennedy was her eternal, undefeated rival. Both Kennedy daughters-in-law had admirers and critics. Those drawn to glamour admired the elegant Jackie, while the more ordinary admired Ethel. And there were far more ordinary people. It was they who provided Robert with support when he ran for the Senate. In 1964, Robert was elected senator. It was Ethel who persuaded Robert to run for president. The situation was complicated by the fact that President Johnson was also a Democrat, meaning Robert would be running, in effect, against his own party. Nevertheless, he entered the race with Ethel's full support. She believed Bobby would be the greatest president America could hope for. Robert truly was very popular. Journalists compared his speeches to rock concerts. All his ideas, racial equality, ending the Vietnam War, preaching morality, and hard work, received sincere support from the American people. On June 5, 1968, Robert Kennedy was assassinated by a young Palestinian-Jordanian immigrant during the presidential campaign at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. 40-year-old Ethel was present and 3 months pregnant with their daughter Rory, their 11th child. When Robert fell, she dropped to her knees and gently stroked his face. Mortally wounded, Robert was taken to the hospital. Robert survived for 26 hours after the attack. When the doctors declared brain death, Ethel remained courageous, very calm, as witnesses later said. She did not let go of her husband's hand and kept repeating words of prayer while his heart still beat. According to family friends, after the funeral, Ethel acted as if her husband had simply gone on a long trip. But it was far more complex. She covered the house with photographs of Robert and visited his grave almost daily. Even paparazzi eventually felt ashamed to photograph the silhouette of a small, pregnant woman stretched across Robert Kennedy's grave. Her youngest daughter, Rory, was born on December 12, 1968, 6 months after her father's death. Upon leaving the hospital, Ethel took her newborn to the cemetery. She brought Rory, the most precious thing she had, to Robert's grave. The couple had been married for 18 years. After Robert's death, no other men entered Ethel's life, though she was still young. A permanent sorrow settled in her soul. Ethel condemned Jackie for betraying John's memory by marrying Onassis. In all other respects, Ethel was, or appeared, normal. She devoted herself to charity, raised her children, and worked tirelessly to establish schools and sports clubs for children from disadvantaged families. In 2012, when asked how she coped with the pain, she replied, "I simply lived in the present, and my faith sustained me." On October 10, 2024, Ethel died of a stroke. She was 96 years old. Over her lifetime, she endured many personal tragedies, including the deaths of her sons David and Michael. After their father's death, David struggled with drug addiction and eventually died of an overdose in 1984 at the age of 28. 15 years later, Michael died in a skiing accident in Aspen, Colorado, at the age of 39. Ethel had 11 children, 34 grandchildren, and many great-grandchildren. She passed away knowing, and believing, that Robert was waiting for her where loving souls are reunited forever.